Mother's Day used to be one of my favorite days. I loved waking up to little surprises, homemade cards, and breakfast in bed, but this year felt different. I woke up alone. No smell of coffee, no soft footsteps from Derek, or even a text from him saying, "Happy Mother's Day." I sat up and looked at the time. 9:42 a.m. I sighed. Maybe he was planning something special later. By noon, Derek still hadn't said anything. Instead, he came into our bedroom, dressed in a sharp navy suit. "We need to leave in 15 minutes, he said, not even looking up from his phone. "Leave? Where?" I asked, surprised. "For brunch. Mom made a reservation. Everyone's coming," he said flatly. I blinked. "You mean your mom planned the brunch?" "Yes, of course." No flowers, no hug, just a calendar event from his mother. I changed quickly and followed him out the door. On the drive there, I stared out the window while Derek talked on his Bluetooth, something about a business deal. He never once asked me how I was feeling, not even a mention of the day. When we arrived, the restaurant was already buzzing. Derek's sister, her kids, some cousins, they were all there. And of course, Carla, my mother-in-law, sat right at the center of the long table like she was the Queen of England. "Happy Mother's Day, darling," she said with a big smile, leaning in to air kiss me. I smiled politely. "Thank you." Carla wore a designer scarf and a gold brooch that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She was glowing. And then came the moment. As we were finishing dessert, Derek stood up, tapping his glass with a spoon. "I have an announcement," he said with a proud grin. "This Mother's Day, I wanted to honor the woman who made me who I am." I felt my cheeks warm. Maybe he would say something kind about me after all. "I booked something very special for you, Mom," Derek continued. "A luxury cruise, 14 days, private suite, first class. You and Aunt Lillian leave next Saturday." Everyone clapped. Carla gasped with joy, her hands over her heart. "Oh, Derek, you shouldn't have," she gushed. I sat there, stunned. 14 days, first class, a $20,000 cruise. Then Derek turned toward me. "And for my lovely wife." "I didn't forget about you, sweetheart," he said, reaching into his pocket. I felt a flicker of hope again. Maybe a necklace? Maybe a spa day? He handed me a small folded paper. "A lottery ticket," he said with a chuckle. "Hey, you never know. You might win big." I just stared at him. Everyone laughed, including Carla, who added, "That's just perfect for her. So fitting." I forced a smile. My hands shook a little as I tucked the ticket into my purse. I felt invisible. No speech, no words of appreciation. Just a joke in the form of a $5 scratch-off. All through the rest of the brunch, people praised Derek for being such a good son. Nobody noticed how quiet I was. Nobody asked if I was okay. When we got home, Derek immediately went into his office to take a quick call. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the untouched vase that once held flowers he used to bring me. I went upstairs, pulled out the lottery ticket, and sat on the bed. I didn't expect anything. I scratched the silver coating slowly with a bobby pin. The first number matched, then the second. I leaned in, then a third. My hands began to tremble. I checked again. $150 million. My heart stopped. I checked again. $150 million. I stood up, the ticket in my hand, and let out a laugh. A quiet, stunned, almost broken kind of laugh. It wasn't just luck. It felt like something bigger. I sat down again, staring at the numbers. My mind went blank. Derek gave me this ticket thinking it was a joke, but it might become the biggest lesson he and his mother will ever learn. I didn't sleep much that night. I just kept looking at that tiny lottery ticket sitting on my nightstand like it held the entire universe inside. $150 million. That number didn't feel real. I must have Googled how to claim a winning ticket at least 20 times. I read everything. How to stay anonymous, how to avoid scams, what to do first. And you know what all the articles said? Don't tell anyone, not even your spouse. So I didn't. Not Derek, not Carla, not even Ellie, my best friend who knows almost everything about me. I put the ticket inside a Ziploc bag, tucked it into a hardcover book I hadn't opened in years, and locked the book in my bedroom safe. Then I took a deep breath, washed my face, and went downstairs like nothing happened. Derek was already eating cereal in front of the TV, still in his pajama pants. He barely looked up. "Morning," he mumbled. "Morning," I replied softly, pouring myself some coffee. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't mention Mother's Day. It was like the whole thing never happened. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to the little things. Things I used to ignore. Derek making big purchases without asking me. Carla calling and acting like our home was hers. Derek brushing me off when I tried to ask about the bills, or the vacation fund, or anything related to money. One night, I overheard Derek on the phone with Carla. I stood just outside his home office and listened. She should be grateful, honestly. I mean, I gave her a gift, didn't I? She's not exactly the reason we're doing well. My stomach dropped. I thought we were a team. I've supported his business from day one. Cooked, cleaned, held things together when he almost went bankrupt. But to him, I was just background noise. The next day, Carla dropped by unannounced, as usual. She stood in the kitchen, sipping tea from my favorite mug. "I told Derek he should get you something useful for Mother's Day," she said with a smirk. "You know, like a vacuum cleaner. That lottery ticket was such a cute idea, though. Maybe you'll win $5. I smiled politely and nodded. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I was learning, I was watching, and I was planning. I started spending my evenings reading, not romance novels, but articles about trusts, financial advisors, and asset protection. I created a fake email account and started contacting lawyers under the name Rebecca Fields, a name I made up. I said I was writing a book about women who suddenly come into wealth. That way, I could ask all my questions without raising suspicion. I also opened a separate bank account in a different town and deposited a small check for my side gig crafting shop, just to test things out. It felt like building a tiny raft in secret while the ship I was on kept leaking. I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to waste this blessing. I wasn't going to run out and buy 10 cars or post about it online. That wasn't me. But I also wasn't going to keep living like I was invisible. This money gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Control. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel stuck. I felt powerful. But power, I realized, is quiet. It doesn't need to yell. It plans. That weekend, Derek asked me to cancel my weekend plans because his mother wanted to have dinner, just the three of us. I nodded. "Of course," I said. "Anything for family." He kissed my cheek and left the room. And I stood there, smiling to myself. Because the woman he gave a $5 lottery ticket to was now holding the keys to $150 million. And not a soul knew. From the outside, nothing changed. I still made Derek's coffee in the mornings, still folded his laundry, still smiled politely whenever Carla called to gossip about her nail appointments and complain about how stressful life is as a retired woman living rent-free in her son's second home. But inside, everything was different. Every moment I spent around them now felt like a performance. I was no longer the woman they saw as weak or forgettable. I was just playing the part, quietly, carefully, and with purpose. Derek didn't notice a thing. In fact, he started acting even more smug. A few days after the brunch, he casually mentioned over dinner that we needed to tighten up our spending because he was reallocating funds for Mom's cruise. Reallocating. That was his word. I nodded and chewed my food slowly, pretending to be concerned. "That makes sense," I said. "We all need to make sacrifices." He smiled and looked proud of himself, like he'd just made some brilliant executive decision. I asked him if he wanted dessert. He said yes. I got up and made a mental note. He's going to learn what a real sacrifice looks like. Meanwhile, I was busy behind the scenes. I found a financial advisor, a woman named Denise from out of state. I used a prepaid phone to call her and never gave my real name. She was sharp, kind, and professional. I told her I was writing a fictional story about a woman who secretly wins the lottery and needs help protecting her winnings from her toxic husband and greedy in-laws. Denise didn't ask questions. She gave me a full roadmap: trusts, LLCs, layered protections, even offshore accounts. I listened, took notes, and started putting things in motion. Every day I acted like nothing had changed. But my mind was racing with plans. Carla called one afternoon sounding excited. "Rachel, sweetheart, I need your help picking out my cruise wardrobe. Derek said I can spend up to $10,000 just on outfits." "Of course," I said warmly. "You deserve it." She laughed and said, "Finally, someone who understands." That night, I sat in bed with my journal and listed everything I wanted to do once I secured the money. Not out of spite, at least not at first, but out of freedom. A small home by the lake, a rescue center for animals, an art studio, traveling, alone, real independence. But then I added a second list, one just for them, for Derek, for Carla. Not to destroy them, just to remind them who they underestimated. Ellie, my best friend, started noticing a change in me. "You've been glowing lately," she said one morning when we met for coffee. "Did something happen?" I smiled and shook my head. "I just realized I've been too quiet for too long." She tilted her head. "You're not pregnant, are you?" I laughed out loud. "No, no babies, just waking up, I guess." Ellie narrowed her eyes. "Is Derek treating you right?" I hesitated. I wanted to spill everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. "I'm fine," I said. "But thank you for asking. You're the only one who ever does." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm always here." It warmed my heart. But it also reminded me how completely alone I was in this secret. Still, I didn't crack. I went back home that evening and helped Derek finalize travel documents for his mother's cruise. He even asked me to drive Carla to the airport when the time came. "Sure," I said sweetly. "I'll make sure she gets there safe and sound." He kissed the top of my head and muttered, "You're such a good wife." I smiled at him, big, wide, and fake. Because soon, I wouldn't be just his good wife. I'd be the woman who walked away without making a sound, after building her empire right under his nose. I always thought building a secret life would be messy, full of lies and risk. But it turns out when no one's really watching you, it's surprisingly easy. Derek and Carla were too busy patting themselves on the back to notice anything. While they planned dinners, bragged about cruises, and criticized the neighbors' landscaping, I was quietly setting the stage for something far bigger. I started with a lawyer. I didn't walk into some office downtown wearing sunglasses like in a movie. I booked a discreet appointment under my middle name, Anne, at a boutique law firm one town over. "Helping a friend going through a messy divorce," I told the receptionist with a smile. "She doesn't want her husband to know she's planning." The receptionist nodded like she'd heard it before. Inside the office, I met with a lawyer named Susan. Calm, confident, discreet, she looked like she could outsmart a team of wolves. I liked her immediately. I told her I needed to create a trust. I didn't mention the lottery, just that I had recently come into a large sum of money and needed it protected, completely separated from my husband and his family. She nodded. "We can create a blind trust. The assets will be placed in the name of the trust, and your name won't be publicly connected. As far as anyone knows, it belongs to the trust, not you." It was perfect. We got to work. Susan handled everything: documents, account setups, shell companies. She introduced me to a network of financial planners, real estate agents, and even a woman who specialized in anonymous philanthropic giving. By the end of the week, my $150 million was quietly moving. Not $1 was in my name. Not one trace pointed back to me. Meanwhile, at home, Derek was acting like he'd conquered the world. One night at dinner, he casually said, "Mom thinks you're finally settling into your role. She said she hasn't heard you complain once." My fork paused in midair. "My role?" I asked, tilting my head. "You know, supportive wife, behind the scenes, keeping things stable." I smiled and nodded. "Well, someone has to, right?" He didn't even catch the sarcasm. Carla, on the other hand, was busy bragging to her friends about her upcoming cruise. "She's treating it like a royal coronation," Ellie whispered one afternoon when we bumped into Carla at the mall. Do you need help getting rid of her? I laughed. Not yet, but keep that offer on standby. Carla had no idea that while she picked out overpriced sunglasses for her trip, I was finalizing the purchase of 3 rental properties, a cozy lakefront cottage, and a small stake in a tech startup, all under different company names, all legally protected. I also bought something else, my childhood home. It was old, a little run down, but filled with memories. It had been sold after my parents passed, and I never thought I'd see it again. But now it was mine. I hired a renovation team to completely redo it. Modern kitchen, spa bathroom, solar panels, everything top of the line. I told the workers not to rush. Make it beautiful, I said. Make it strong. Just like me. When the cruise day finally came, I woke up early, made Carla a to-go snack, and drove her to the airport like the good daughter-in-law I was supposed to be. She spent the entire ride criticizing the airline, the cruise company, the color of my blouse, all while smiling and calling me sweetheart. Before she walked away, she leaned over and whispered, "Derek's lucky I keep you in line." I just smiled. You always know best, Carla. As she disappeared through the security gate, I sat in my car, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Good luck with that cruise." I wasn't being sarcastic, because by the time she came back, everything would be different. With Carla out of the country, the house felt lighter, quieter, like I could finally breathe without her perfume choking the air. Derek, of course, missed her terribly. "She's just got this energy, you know?" he said one evening, sipping wine on the couch. "The house feels empty without her." I smiled and nodded. Empty can be peaceful. He didn't catch the meaning. While he busied himself with calls and bragging about some golf tournament he'd been invited to, I stayed out of the way and used the quiet to my advantage. I started going out more. Not for errands, for business. Some mornings I was meeting with real estate developers about rental projects. Other days, I visited my childhood home to check on the renovation progress. The workers greeted me as Ms. Anne, and I liked it that way. No connections, no questions. The house was coming together beautifully. The walls had been knocked down to create open spaces. Sunlight poured into the kitchen. I walked barefoot through the hallways and ran my hands over the new marble countertops. This was more than a house. It was my fresh start. One afternoon, I stood in the master bathroom, staring at the oversized tub they'd just installed. For a moment, I saw myself in it. A glass of wine in hand, soft music playing, not a care in the world. Then my phone buzzed. "Derek. Pick up some groceries on your way home. Out of almond milk and paper towels." "No, please. No, thank you." Not even a, "Hey, how's your day?" I stared at the message and laughed. Another day, I came home to find Derek rummaging through the mail with a concerned look. "You opened a new account with Silverwood Bank?" he asked, holding up a piece of junk mail. I blinked. "Oh, that must have been when I was thinking about starting a small online shop again. I forgot to close it." He shrugged and tossed the letter. "We can't afford extra hobbies right now. Things are tight with Mom's travel bills." "Tight," I repeated softly. "Sure, Derek, real tight, while you sip imported wine and order custom golf clubs." I kept playing along, but my transformation was happening from the inside out. I started changing how I dressed, not flashy, but elegant. Clothes that made me feel powerful. I cut my hair shorter, styled it differently. I began wearing subtle makeup again. Nothing too bold, just enough to remind myself I still existed. Even Ellie noticed. "You look expensive," she said during one of our coffee dates. I smiled. "Just cleaning out the old wardrobe." "No," she said, sipping her latte. "You're glowing. Did you finally dump Derek?" I laughed. Not yet. But I had started seeing him clearly. The way he made decisions without asking, the way he acted like he was the only adult in the room, the way he used words like "we" when he meant him and his mother. And the more I saw, the less I cared about keeping him comfortable. While he planned more business dinners and weekend golf retreats, I made bigger moves. I bought a quiet piece of land by the coast, just a patch of earth for now. But someday it would be a healing retreat for women starting over. No one knew my name was behind it. I liked it that way. I also hired a private investigator. Not for revenge, not yet, but because I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to know what Derek was hiding. He wasn't cheating. He was too smug and lazy for that. But money, business, secrets? I had a feeling there was more going on than golf and brunches. The investigator agreed to be discreet and send updates only through a secure online folder. I logged in every night to check, like a secret ritual. Meanwhile, I kept being the perfect wife. I smiled when Derek talked. I laughed at his tired jokes. I wore the apron and baked the cookies. But behind that apron was a woman rebuilding her life. One quiet, powerful move at a time. 2 weeks before Carla returned from her cruise, I made my final move. Derek had no idea. But while he was busy planning a weekend networking trip with his college buddies, I was finalizing the paperwork to sell his entire business. Well, our business, technically. Years ago, when Derek launched his company, he used a big chunk of my inheritance to get it off the ground. I didn't complain. I believed in him, believed in us. I didn't ask for my name to be added to the company. I just signed the checks and handled the paperwork while he played CEO. But when I started digging recently, I discovered something funny. My name was on the business. Derek had made me a 50% owner to help with taxes during the early years, and he never removed it. Big mistake. Because now, using the trust I had set up with Susan, I transferred my 50% ownership to an anonymous entity, one fully under my control. Then, I used that entity to approach Derek's silent partner with an offer. Buy the entire business. All of it. He didn't hesitate. Derek hadn't been pulling his weight anyway, and Carla's cruise payments had delayed supplier invoices for months. The company was bleeding, just enough to make the offer look like a rescue, not a takeover. Within 48 hours, the deal was sealed. The business was sold, the papers signed, the accounts cleared. The only thing left was the reveal. And I chose the perfect moment for it. Derek's birthday. He threw himself a grand party at our house. Nothing new. Expensive catering, fake laughs, and a cake taller than our marriage had ever been strong. He made sure to invite important people, the same ones who never asked about me, never remembered my name. I wore a deep blue dress that hugged my figure just right. Simple earrings, a calm smile. I played my part, as always. About halfway through the party, Derek stood up and tapped his glass. "First of all, thank you all for being here tonight," he said with that smug charm everyone seemed to admire. "I want to especially thank my amazing wife, Rachel, who keeps everything running behind the scenes." A few people clapped lazily. I smiled and raised my glass. "Actually, I have something to share too." Derek turned a little surprised. I never made speeches. I never interrupted. I stepped forward and cleared my throat. This year, I received an unexpected gift. Something small at first. Something most people would overlook. The room grew quiet. "A $5 lottery ticket," I continued. "That's what Derek gave me for Mother's Day, while his mother got a $20,000 cruise." A few guests chuckled nervously. "What he didn't realize," I said, holding up a copy of the winning ticket I'd printed, "is that I won $150 million, so." Gasps rippled through the room. Derek laughed like I was joking. "Okay, very funny." I turned toward him. "I'm not joking. I claimed it. Quietly. I set up trusts, accounts, and protections. And in the last few months, I also sold your company." His face went pale. "What? No, you can't." "I could," I interrupted. "Because I'm a 50% owner. You forgot, didn't you? The paperwork you had me sign all those years ago?" His eyes darted around, looking for someone to tell him this wasn't real. "I transferred my share. The new entity bought out your partner. The sale is complete. And the accounts? Already moved. The business is no longer yours." Carla, who had returned from her cruise that morning and was sipping champagne in the corner, dropped her glass. It shattered against the floor. I turned to her. "Hope you enjoyed the cruise. It might be the last vacation you take on someone else's dime." She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't care to hear it. I turned back to the guests. "Thank you all for coming. I'll be stepping away now. I've got better places to be." And with that, I walked out of my own house, the one I'd paid for, cleaned, sacrificed for, with my head held high. Derek stood frozen. Carla muttered something about lawsuits, but I didn't hear them anymore, because I was done listening. 3 weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my newly renovated childhood home, watching the sun dip behind the lake. The water shimmered like gold, the air was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt calm. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause or music or champagne. It's silent, warm, like sitting still in a place that finally feels safe. After I left Derek's birthday party, I never looked back. I didn't answer his calls, texts, or emails. I didn't even bother with a long goodbye. I didn't owe him one. The divorce papers were served the following week, swift, clean, and impossible to fight. My lawyers had everything locked in. Derek tried to argue, of course. Carla even showed up at my lawyer's office demanding to speak to someone in charge. They were shown the door. Turns out, when you treat people like servants long enough, you forget what they're capable of. You assume they'll stay quiet, no matter how loud your disrespect gets. But I wasn't quiet anymore. Word spread fast. Derek's business empire had crumbled, and so had his reputation. The new owners replaced him within days. He tried to call in favors from friends, but most of them only liked him for his money. And now, he had none. Carla, stripped of her cruise glow and shopping trips, moved in with her sister. Apparently, her credit cards had been tied to Derek's accounts, which were frozen during the transition. She tried to sue me, but had no legal grounds. She left me one voicemail saying, "You're heartless." I smiled as I deleted it. Funny how greedy people call you heartless when they can't use you anymore. Meanwhile, I got to work creating something meaningful. I launched the Rising Light Foundation, a program to help women regain their freedom. Women stuck in controlling marriages, overlooked mothers, forgotten caretakers. I funded shelters, scholarship programs, and private legal aid, quietly, anonymously. And I didn't stop there. I gifted Ellie a beach house in Maine. In her name, no strings attached. She cried for an hour straight. "Why?" she asked, overwhelmed. "Because you saw me when I felt invisible," I told her, "and you never once made me feel small." I also donated millions to local charities, especially ones focused on education for young girls. I remembered how I gave up college to support Derek's dreams. I didn't regret it, but I wouldn't let other women make that sacrifice blindly. Some people asked if I'd ever remarry, if I was seeing anyone. I wasn't. And I wasn't in a rush. Love will come when it's real, when it's built on respect, not control. Until then, I had me, and I was more than enough. One afternoon, while I was painting on the porch, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded photo. Derek sitting on a park bench, looking lost. Gray in his beard, wrinkles that didn't used to be there, no smile. On the back, someone had scribbled, "Thought you'd want to see what you walked away from." I burned it in the fire pit, because I already knew. I hadn't just walked away from a marriage. I walked away from a life where I was always last, where I was talked over, looked through, and handed scraps, while being told I should be grateful. Now, I write my own checks. I build my own spaces. I wake up each morning and smile, not because someone told me to, but because I finally feel free. The real gift that year wasn't the lottery ticket. It was the lesson. A lesson to never shrink myself for someone else's comfort again. A lesson that silence isn't peace, and that sometimes a $5 joke becomes a $150 million miracle.